Hey everyone, welcome to the Rise and Above podcast, a platform for you to share your story. Oftentimes, we all have something that happens to us in life and we have no way of sharing. Many people want an outlet, whether it's writing a book or going on a massive networking platform or starting an inspirational social media account. With the Rise and Above platform, anyone with an inspiring, motivating, or interesting story can come on and share. It could be anything from the struggles of starting a business, the struggles of overcoming homelessness or mental illness. I've interviewed victims of rape, sexual assault, and abuse. There is no subject that is off limits. This platform offers a safe and fun way for you to share your story through a one-on-one experience. If you would like to share your story, the best way to reach out would be through social media. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook or through email. All the links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the Rise and Above podcast. My name is David Hess, and today I have Dara Mayhoe with me. She is a double entrepreneur here in the Lansing area. She has gone through a lot of pain and struggle in her lifetime, and I guess without me talking too much about it, I don't want to steal her thunder. I'll have her introduce herself and explain a little bit about her past. How are you doing today?
I'm great, David. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you so much for inviting me here. Glad to be here. Dara Mayhoe, Lansing native. I'm from Lansing, born and raised. Kind of dipped off a couple times, moved to a couple surrounding cities here. But yeah, I'm a Lansing native, double entrepreneur, just doing my thing here in Lansing, and I'm just glad to be here.
Now, you said you're from the Lansing area. You were born and raised here, correct?
Yeah, born and raised.
Wow. How do you like Lansing?
I love Lansing. A lot of people feel like, especially if they were born here,
Mm-hmm.
feel like maybe their experiences made them want to move away or try
Right.
new things. But my perspective on it is, whether my experiences were good or bad, what's my place in making it better? So I'm all about, as I learned a quote from my good friend, bloom where you're planted. And I was planted in Lansing, and I'm just so grateful to be blooming here. And so I just really want to be an integral role of just making the thing better. What can I do? I wake up every day and I say, Lord, what can I do to make this a better place?
And I think you're doing just that by having the two businesses that you have and employing other people and being able to inspire other people that work for you, and because they
Yeah.
obviously look at you and can see some of the things that you've gone through and be like, wow, she's really come somewhere.
Yeah.
So I guess with that being said, you want to kind of take us back and talk about some of the pain and struggle that you've endured, and then we'll kind of get into where you are now.
Sure. Yep. So, like I said, I'm born and raised here in Lansing, and my background was a bit unstable. Moved a lot, experienced foster care. I don't like to say I was a bad kid because I don't believe in bad kids. I think kids make bad choices, but I really don't think I was a bad kid. But I had a lot of um, adversity and things that made me different, that made kids tease me and bully me, like, I mean, relentlessly tease me and bully me.
About what?
Oh my goodness, such a good question, David. Okay. So, kids are just sometimes mean anyway. So we got teased for being poor. So like I didn't come to school with the greatest clothes or whatever. But my mom did the best that she could, and whatever those threads were, she would steam it up, put a crease in it, put a cuff or whatever she had to do to make it better. But I experienced alopecia when I was like 12.
Me too.
No way,
Me too.
David. Oh my, like super love. But yeah, I experienced alopecia
It's
and
embarrassing, isn't it?
yeah, really
Especially at a
embarrassing.
young age, and especially imagine being a girl.
Yeah.
It's like a boy can just shave his head and look
Mhm.
better, but with a girl, it's
Yup.
quite noticeable.
Yeah, sure. And so like kids used to tease me really bad. Like I acquired names like Baldy Locks, like the bald headed girl, all kinds of questions. Do you have cancer? Do you this? Do you that?
What
Why is your hair like
what do
that?
you think why do you think that was? Why do you think you had alopecia? Because when I had it, it was due to stress.
Hmm.
Was it stress?
It probably was. They never really put their finger on it.
Okay.
And I know they say alopecia is irreversible or incurable, but I grew out of it. I
Me
grew out
too.
of it. Yeah, see, by the grace, yes. And so I grew out of it. But during that period, okay, so during that period of time, I was experiencing alopecia, and then I also went half blind in my left eye, and then we were homeless at the time,
Mm.
and it was just a cocktail of reasons to just be angry at the world, angry at my situation, angry with people, period.
Now, homeless, you mean you guys were living on the streets?
Well, we weren't necessarily living on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I thank God about Lansing. People can put Lansing down if they want to, but Lansing has been just, man, just so resourceful. There's so many resources that we were able to use in Lansing.
Okay.
So even though we had a lot of hardships, there were a lot of resources that we used. So I remember nights of staying at the Economic Crisis Center out in East Lansing, or staying at Loaves and Fishes, or the other shelters that were available. So there was always somewhere that we went,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was a shelter. I don't remember any nights of sleeping in our car. Maybe one night we had this big hoopty station wagon, but it was fun to me and my sister. We were like, "Hey, party over here!" And we had a family friend, because we were homeless and we didn't actually have a car, so we were blessed with that car. Like the week that we became homeless, probably for the fifth time at that time, and I was about 10 years old or 12 years old. And I remember being in this big old station wagon, and it was only like a night or two that we had to stay in that car.
Right.
But like me and my sister were like super buddies, and we were like, "This is the life." And so I thank God, because
It's
some of
like camping.
yeah, I know, right? Yup. And so even though it was a struggle for my mom and my stepdad at the time, um, it didn't really seem that bad, because the spirit of it all didn't bring us down, and I do thank God for that. That they didn't make it seem to us that we were in such a struggle that we were. Yeah. But yeah, so like I went blind, half blind in my left eye. I had alopecia. We were homeless. And then, like, for whatever other reasons, kids just wanted to pick on me. And that made me very angry. And so that kind of developed a very violent spirit. And I'm not going to say it developed, because it was a choice. I had a choice whether I was going to snap off, or I would, have self control and try to deal with it the best that I could. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, as a kid then, I wasn't as strong as I am now.
Right.
So the answer to all that was lay them hands, okay? Yeah, yup. And so that really resulted in some of my instability, because the way that I responded to those adversities made me have to move around. Because of the fights, I had to go to a different school, because of some of the behaviors that I was exhibiting at home. To be honest, even at this age, I'm 42 now, and I still wonder where, if I was, and I don't know if it's a guilt, or if I'm holding myself accountable, but I often wonder, did I play a role in my transition to foster care? Because at that time when I went to foster care, I was a behaviorally challenged kid. I did give my mom a hard time. My mom was a single parent. There was some things that I probably could have done better. Now, would it have resulted in like the disruption in our family, being with complete strangers? And I mean, like, not strangers that took care of me, but strangers that almost made the situation worse. Like, it snowballed into some other stuff, in certain homes. Not all of
Mm-hmm.
them, but, I often wonder, did I play a role, or what was my role in that? And I think in the most humble of ways, God has even shown me some ways that I could have responded better, that may have brought some hardships to my mom. And so, in the place that I'm at 42 years old, because if we're still living and we have a way to make it right with the people that we may have had transgressions with, then that still leaves that space to make it right. And so I do thank God that I have a very close knit relationship with my mother. I have a relationship with my father that's developing. And even as we continue on with the story of my own children, I have a great relationship with my children, So I have just learned to just look at situations for what they are, try to find the good in it all, even if that good kind of stings a little bit, because I do believe that there's purpose in our pain. And I do believe in humility. And I think some of my growth has been attributed to just looking at, like, sis, you ain't all that, there are some things that you could have done better. So just really taking this time to just really evaluate my life, and even places that I have grown from, to really connect the dots, and all that, and see how it all ties together.
That's
Yeah.
a lot.
That is a lot.
So kind of unpacking that a little bit, did you ever express to your parents that you were being bullied and whatnot at school?
Yeah, I did.
Was anything ever done about that?
No, because, and I'll tell you, no, in my way of looking at it, it doesn't look like there was any resolution initiated. But as I get older and I understand the struggle of some of the ones that came before me, I understand, because if they had junk in their trunk, how in the world would they process having a kid that was junky too? So
Right.
it's like it's been a very merciful process.
It's a vicious circle. I
Yep.
mean, unfortunately, when you're dealing with a bunch of damaged people,
Mhm.
adults, and
True
then they
that.
have kids, their kids eventually become damaged, and
Yeah.
then just the cycle keeps
Yeah.
repeating itself.
Yeah.
History repeats.
Yep.
You know.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it takes a real initiative, and you realizing that there's an issue for you to want to change.
Mhm.
You know.
Yep. That's key right there. You have to realize that you have an issue.
Yeah.
If you don't think anything is broken, what are you gonna fix?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. And you realized eventually that you had anger issues,
Yeah.
or you needed to deal with things a certain way, a different way.
Yeah. And it wasn't then. It was a long time
Okay.
past 12 and 14 years old that I realized that I had a problem and I
Right.
needed help. And it was probably 15 years past then, that I actually realized, you know what, Dara, if you're having the same issue it may not be that you're the cause of it, but certainly the way that we respond to adversity
Right.
could either grow the fire, or it can, what word am I looking for? But it could put the fire out,
Right. Right.
And I think that the way that I was responding to a lot of it, I wasn't a fire starter, but baby, yeah. So I'm glad that I did mature to a point of being able to see, some of my own flaws and faults, and be able to just kind of surrender to self control.
Now, you had said that you had been incarcerated before. Do
Mhm.
you think that? I mean, I want you to tell your story, but
Mhm.
do you think that your anger and the way like your past and the way you had to deal with things led you to that point?
David. Ha! Do I think? Who? It was the culprit of it all. It was the culprit of it all. Because most of my incarcerations was due to lack of self control, violent behavior. Um,
Now, when you say you were incarcerated, did you ever go to prison, or were you in just jail? What was your incarceration for?
mhm. So that's a good question, because incarceration can mean prison or a jail sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And by the grace of God, and I'm going to say that and only that, by the grace of God, I didn't make it to prison.
Mm.
Because when I've always heard people say things that I thought was crazy, right? Like, oh, Jesus showed up in the courtroom, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's Jesus standing there next to the lawyer defending you. But really, honestly, I may not have saw him with my visual eyes, but I felt him in the courtroom because I was literally David, I was literally on my way to prison. They had already determined because I wasn't going to
Oh,
plead guilty. I wasn't going to plead guilty. I wasn't guilty. I felt like I was defending myself, which I was. But the question was, did you have to defend yourself like that? You know?
right,
And
right.
so when I went to court, I was ready to be sentenced to, if I can remember right, it was either 2 to 5 or 5 to 10. I'm gonna just say 2 to 5 to just not exaggerate the story.
Right. Which
Eh,
means you're serving 5.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And especially if you're not going in to take a plea deal, and because I was
Right.
gonna take it to trial, and I went in ready to plead not guilty, and the judge was like, "Wait a minute, hold up, wait, halt, hold up." One of the victims, who I had viciously stabbed. Between the two, it was 7 or 8 times. Um, and the second victim wrote a letter to the judge and said that if she hadn't involved herself in the quarrel, because it was a quarrel between myself and another person,
Mm.
if she hadn't involved herself in the quarrel, she wouldn't have been injured. That was probably one of the most humble experiences I've had in my whole life.
Did he read it in the courtroom?
He didn't read it in the courtroom, and I wish to this day I could have heard the words that were expressed.
Yeah.
But he said he just kind of reiterated what the letter
Okay.
said. And I was so relieved
How
because
did that leave you feeling when with the victim that you had stabbed?
respect.
Respect.
A whole lot of respect. A whole lot of respect because I knew I was guilty because I did it.
Right.
But I felt a sense of just like, man, is anybody going to stand up and say that I really was defending myself? I mean, like, my defense attorney couldn't even really fight for me. I mean, he was like a court appointed.
He's like, you did it.
Right. I mean, what do
You're
you
going
know?
to prison.
Yeah, pretty much, sucks to be you.
Oh
And
man.
so I just felt so relieved. I felt so relieved. And I felt so grateful. And that showed me something about people. That showed me that everybody isn't vindictive. Everybody doesn't want payback. Everybody doesn't want to take matters into their own hands.
Mhm.
And when that person sent that letter to the judge, that was a clear indication of the grace, favor, and mercy that was on my life because I truly should have been headed to prison. And so, because they didn't give me that 2 to 5 or 5 to 10 or whatever it was that they were trying to give me,
Mhm.
I ended up getting 1 year
Wow.
in the county jail. And so I served my 1 year. And back then, I know there's some stuff going on right now about good time and all that. But hey,
Hey, right here.
give me that. I need that. Yes, good time, good sense. Yes.
Yep.
I was um I was a recipient of good time.
Okay.
And so I got
Yep.
2 months shaved off of my sentence and I only did 10 months. And it was bittersweet because as we move on to into my interview, I'll explain how it affected my family, but it was bittersweet because I wasn't sent to prison.
Right.
It was sweet because I didn't get sent to prison,
Right.
but it was bitter because of some of the other consequences that I had to deal with. But yeah, so
Real
that
quick, what's your opinion on this? I obviously you are kind of pro good time makes good sense.
man, come on, yeah,
But I know a lot of people, and this is the argument.
mhm,
If you did something, let's say you stabbed somebody,
mhm,
like you stabbed my family
mhm,
member, and a lot of people would have the feeling that, all right, you stabbed my family member, so you deserve to go to jail and serve the full amount of time that you were given
yep,
for doing wrong. What's your opinion on that?
mhm. My opinion, David, is it's a case by case situation. It depends on who the person is. what type of progress are you making when you're locked up? Because they say fake it till you make it, but you really can't fake good character, because at the end of the day, it comes to a head if you're
Hmm.
faking. It may take a while, but it comes to a head if you're faking.
I had Adam Grant on the podcast. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't.
He's doing some work with I don't he's not working with Good Time Makes Good Sense, but he's working with some other local nonprofits and whatnot.
Mhm.
And he was saying that you can fake it till you make it until you go to prison,
Yeah.
and then you can't.
Yep,
You know,
exactly.
you're kind of met at a head at that point.
Yeah, yep. And so I don't know that experience, about, what it's like when you go to prison. But I know what good time means when you're in any, I'm just going to say my lockup situation, because I was a habitual offender, and I still didn't go to prison. But when I got sentenced to that offense,
Hmm.
at that time, I was a habitual. So even with that letter, the judge could have still looked at me and said, you know what? This is your reputation. I don't care what type of letter they're sending.
Right.
You need to go and learn a lesson. But I didn't have to beg for grace. I didn't have to beg for mercy. It was all set up for me there. But when it comes to good time making good sense, I couldn't have said it better, because when you go to a lockup situation, I'm just going to use myself again as an example.
Okay.
When I got locked up, it wasn't a whole lot that I could do with my time. I knew, even in some of the worst decisions that I had made, I knew I wasn't that person. I knew I was making bad choices, but even sitting in the crack house slinging dope, I had a conscience in me that said, Dara, that's not you. Even in the instance of that violent behavior, I felt regretful, even remorseful, even in the act. But at the same time, when you don't have self control, really that's kind of overpowering you.
Can we talk
And
about that for a minute?
mm-hmm,
So when you're doing all that,
mm-hmm,
when you're slinging dope, you're in a crack house, whatever, what is you said you know you're better than that.
mm-hmm.
Do you think that you just can't do better than that, and that's why you're still doing that, or is that do you believe you're just a product of your environment and the way you grew up and what the environment you grew up in kind of put you in that position, so you just kind of remain in that position? Because obviously that's not who you are. You're
Mm-hmm.
not doing that now. You're a double business owner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So David, I would almost say for me, it was more of being a product of my environment, because the environment of that I was in said that no one cares about you, or you're not special enough, because going back to those foster care moments, and even, I mean, I had went to juvenile detention even in the ninth grade for having a loaded Glock at school.
oh jeez.
Yeah, we skipped that part. That was well before the stabbing incident, you know?
Wow.
So I was in all of these situations that said, Dara, you're not good enough. They don't believe you. They don't. And so I was so wrapped up in what the world thought, because, again, I was young, immature, and didn't have my own relationship with God that I have right now. So I was depending on what the world thought about me. And so I became a product of my
Well,
environment.
probably because you felt so disrespected from your peers
Hmm.
and people made fun of you all the time, so you wanted
Yeah.
some respect.
Exactly. I'm
Yep.
like, y'all gonna put some respect on it, okay?
Why did you take a Glock to school? Were you gonna shoot somebody?
So I didn't take a Glock to school.
Okay.
Again, in that vein of wanting to be accepted, and I'm the cool girl. Don't mess with me. You'll learn about me. And I was just in the wrong group, hanging with the wrong kids at the wrong time. And because I wanted to make a name for myself, one of my friends did come to school with a loaded Glock, and they caught wind of it. And in an effort to cover him up, I took the rap. I
Wow.
didn't take the rap. I actually took possession of the gun, and then somebody snitched on me.
Oh.
Yep, somebody knew he had it, which was like, it was a messy situation or whatever. They were mad at me because they thought that I was his girlfriend, but really he was my homeboy. I kind of wanted to be one of the homeboys. I'm like, the girls don't like me, so what's up, fellas? You know. But yeah, it was a messy situation, and it just kind of turned into a mess. and they snitched on me, which was actually looking back, if my kid was at a school and some girl had a big duffel bag purse with a loaded Glock. I mean, it was literally the same handgun that the police had on their hip.
Mm.
And so that was a dangerous situation.
Right.
That was a very dangerous situation. And so I was apprehended at school in front of everybody.
How embarrassing.
Yeah, the secretary at school was my grandmother, who was a missionary at the time, I want to say,
Oh,
at a
wow.
local church. Yup. And so her friend worked in the office. And she just held her head down. She was so heartbroken to see precious little
Oh my
Dara from the
gosh.
church be taken away in a cop car. And yep, I spent a couple months in the Ingham County Youth Center after that. Yep, and so that was after foster care and all of that stuff. I think it might have been before. I can't even. There was so many events around that time. But yeah, so it was just a matter of my environment, wanting to be the cool kid,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to prove to people that you don't mess with me.
Right.
But I honestly don't really regret it, because if I hadn't had those experiences, how would I have a passion right now for the kids that are making the same choices, for the moms that are having parenting issues, for the moms that have trouble, providing for their
Mm-hmm.
children and having a hard time if they become homeless, and how it will affect their children and
Right.
all of that. So I see it coming full circle. I
Well,
really do.
you definitely can't regret your past. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I think a lot of people get tied up in. They'll hold regret to things that they did in their past, and the only thing you can do is learn from your past.
Exactly.
And if you don't learn from your past, then you're doing something wrong.
Exactly.
If you're just continuing that circle, and you made a mistake at 15, or whatever, how old you were when you brought that gun to school, and
Yep.
you still are making that mistake, and you haven't
Yeah.
learned from it, then you should regret your past a little bit.
Exactly.
But if you've learned from it, you definitely shouldn't regret it, because
Yep.
that's made you who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow. You
It's a lot, David.
This is a lot, and we're not
Yeah.
even halfway through your story. This is crazy. So, you've been incarcerated quite a few times. One
Yeah.
time you went to the juvenile facility for bringing a loaded, or not, you didn't bring it, but you had a loaded gun in your possession.
Mhm.
You've gone to jail for stabbing somebody. What else have you gone to jail for?
Well, it was pretty much mostly. I mean, some stuff you don't tell, David. Whoa. I'll just say I have a rap sheet that you could probably make into a skirt. I'm just going to say that. All 10 pages. But I don't even feel like the same person. I feel like a brand new woman. Some things, I'll even admit, some things that are on my criminal history, I tend to be ashamed of, because I see God working on me. It's a process, It's
Hmm.
not like some things are sudden, and some we're healed as we go.
Right.
And I see some of that healing is as I go. Um, I can't say that there's anything that I haven't ever shared with anyone, but it depends on the case. If it's a situation and it's very intimate, and I
Hmm.
see that it desperately needs my testimony,
Right.
and then I share it. But there are some things that I have just like, Lord, you gonna have to humble me in a mighty way to make me share that. And I think almost everybody has that same, and nobody's just a completely
Hmm.
open book.
Right.
Because then we do open ourselves up for, just whatever may come.
Right.
So I'm very,
Yeah. You gotta kind of, you can't go around telling everything. I
Yep,
get that.
yep.
Yeah.
But most of my incarcerations were all circumferenced around violent behavior. I have been in domestic abuse situations, to where I tend to be an advocate for domestic abuse, but I also tend to be an advocate based on my own experience, because my own experience wasn't just as being the victim. I was also the aggressor
Mm.
at some times, because again, that was before I was delivered from that violent behavior.
Right.
So I still had that mindset. Okay, you come for me, I'm coming back for you, baby, and you better hope that I don't come to you stronger than you did before because I had a mindset at sometimes of even wanting to see you die. And I just thank God because there's no way, like, it's just such a different spectrum of thinking, you know, to
Mm-hmm.
be in one point of saying, you know what, you hurt me, and so now I want to see you die or suffer badly, to a point of now in my life, I say, you know what, there is no hurt. There's no depth of hurt that you could do to me to make me want to have that type of vengeance. In fact, there is really, because I'm still dealing with some things now that even happens to me as a Christian with Christian people,
Oh yeah.
you know, that
Yeah.
make me be like, oh, Jesus, I didn't know. I thought it was going to be green grass and bunnies hopping. But that's not the
Yeah.
story. And I think that's what builds our Christian character when we can take persecution, you know, and we can come out of it and say, you know what? It's not my job to have vengeance with you. The word says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So it almost brings you to a point of not wanting to revenge, but also to a point of sorrow because no one succeeds by doing bad, um, or um, or hurt,
Mm-hmm.
or just anything that doesn't do well for someone. God doesn't repay us with good for doing bad to people, even when people do bad to us, you know? And so I
Turn
just,
the other cheek.
yep, that's right. You know, and that's easier said than done. That's,
Even if
that,
even if you don't really, if you're not religious, it's always good to
yep.
just turn the other cheek,
Yeah.
because I mean somebody may say something to you, but it's never good to react back,
True story.
because
True
then
story.
it's gonna go nowhere, or
Yep.
it's gonna go somewhere and it's gonna land you in jail or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
somewhere you don't want to
exactly.
be. Yeah.
Exactly. So I would say that yeah, of all of the lockups and incarcerations and all of that, and it's just so funny because people will still hold you accountable for the things that you've gone through even if you have changed. And
Mhm.
and and we don't have to know that a person has changed
Right.
just because we know their background. I'll never forget, David. I'm working on a big project right now, right?
Cool. I
And
like hearing
and
that.
it deals a lot with my testimony. And it took for me to go back to the Lansing Police Department and ask for some of my records. And when they looked at those records, they
Oh
looked
boy.
at me, and it was a Friday because I don't go into my office on Friday. And so I'm much more casual on Fridays with my baseball cap and my t shirt and my sweats or whatever. And so I come in, and so I don't look like a businesswoman,
Oh
but
boy.
whatever. Do you have to look like a business person to be respected? And so I come in and I ask for my records. And so when they pull up my stuff, you know, I'm sure they were like, oh, wow, you
We
know.
should throw her in cuffs right now.
Right. And so the officer on site asked in the most just disrespectful
Mm.
way, so what are you doing with yourself now?
What?
Yep. So what are you doing with yourself now? Because I was requesting those records, so I could have been requesting those records for whatever reason.
Right.
In their eyes, it may have been to, I don't know. And when they gave me that attitude, I said to myself, "Where what you're telling me is you don't believe that anything has changed the way
Mhm.
that you're asking me." And I could have pridefully said everything that's going on with me, all the
Right.
impressive, glittery stuff that's going on. And you know what? I had to humble myself because I probably would have been arrogant in my response. And I said, you know, I just don't have time to tell you all the good stuff I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me like, whatever, okay. And that reminds me too of a story about my kid in the first grade or something. He had a little tiff or whatever, something really petty in his class. And I just saw that it just wasn't the right class for him. And so we decided to switch classes for him. And that was the same response that the teacher had when we chose to switch his class. And she said, I said, he'll do better in another class or something I said. And she goes, oh, we'll see. Well, that first grader who is now a freshman in college also has a testimony that he's never had any significant problems in high school. To my knowledge, when I mentioned it to him before, he was like, Mom, I think I had one situation. Well, if we got to ponder on it, it wasn't that deep. A kid that really never had any suspensions or anything that set him back
Right.
from excelling. And so that whole we'll see or what are you doing with yourself now? All that,
Right.
that just was fuel to my fire. That was fuel to
Right.
my fire to say it doesn't matter what the haters think or expect. Baby, you get out there and wherever you're at, you knock that ball out the park because at the end of the day, when you're pleased and God is pleased with what you're doing, it doesn't matter what other people think because whether you do good or bad, somebody always has something to say.
Someone always has something to say, regardless. And
Yep.
the thing is when people see you doing good, then they really have something to say.
Yep.
Because people don't like seeing people doing good.
Yep.
People are just haters.
Yeah.
But in kind of the devil's advocate, do you think in the police officer's perspective, or I'm assuming it was a police officer that you had
Mhm.
talked to get your records,
Mhm.
do you think with somebody like with your rep sheet, when they came in and asked for that, and they pull that up, they see all these different things.
Mhm.
I imagine it's just
Mhm.
all the way down the screen. Do you think that oftentimes they kind of see a repeating cycle
Mhm.
to where people don't make it out? People are just they keep doing the same thing,
Yeah.
and they don't necessarily have the success that maybe you've had,
Yeah.
and so maybe they've kind of made a premature judgment.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
I do. I do.
I mean, not that it's right,
No,
because
it's not
I
right.
don't think it's okay to just
Mm-mm.
assume things about people.
I get
but
what you're saying.
yeah.
I get what you're saying because a person with 14 arrests, it may have been more, but what I can recall counting because I literally did count each occurrence of arrest for someone that has a history of 14 arrests by the Lansing Police Department. I can believe at the 14th arrest they probably did say, you know what, she's not gonna change. We're gonna. I mean, they knew me by name. They did. They knew me by name because again, David, all of these arrests were within a 3 or 4 year time
Mm.
span. So they were in close proximity of each other a lot of times, especially in the domestic abuse situations. And it was a mutually abusive situation. They were
Right.
coming. I mean, we weren't arrested every time, but like we were in contact with the police like every other week.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I mean, but for a person that now tries to see good in every situation,
Mhm.
I would hope that law enforcement would try to be a little more empathetic when you do come in contact with someone,
Right.
even if it's in an instance of arrest or of booking or whatever.
Right.
That's a time to minister or encourage, not, like, well, you know what? If you make me feel like I'm a butthole or I'm just a
Mhm.
problematic person,
Right.
I already don't have confidence in myself, and then you don't have confidence in me. Okay, well, you don't expect much of me anyway. So when I go out and do the same thing, it's not a big surprise.
Well, and I think that's what kind of brings a lot of the tension between, I guess, people who, the public and police officers.
Mhm.
Like in a traffic stop or something. If a police officer pulls somebody over for, like for instance, who was telling me, crap, what's his name? Rich Griffin
Mhm.
from Good Time Makes Good
Sure.
Sense. Do you know who he is?
I don't know him, but I was very intrigued by that interview.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So he was saying in the interview that he just gets pulled over because they'll get behind him and see his record and they'll just pull him over. And I'm like, so if you pull somebody over because you see their record and you come up to the car and you already have an attitude with them because what are you up to now?
Mhm.
Like what are you doing
Exactly.
now?
Mhm.
It kind of creates some tension between the person you pulled over and the police officer. So
Mhm.
then it kind of instigates a
Yep.
certain narrative that could possibly come out of that situation.
Sure. Yep. I agree. I agree a lot, and I tend to use that same perspective with my sons. Just because my thing with them, I tell them all the time. You know what? You're guilty just by you're you're guilty by appearance, you're guilty by the stereotype, you're guilty by all these narratives, that people use to say you're guilty. Because why? Because dark skin is intimidating. Long hair plus dark skin is intimidating. My youngest son, who is my little bundle of joy. No, I should stop saying that because I think that's kind of pushing him away. But he is just,
How old is he?
he'll be 19.
Oh, yeah, you should stop saying that.
Okay, but he is my baby David. Okay, that's a whole nother podcast. But, he, for people who are stereotypical, look at people just by, we size people up by the way that they look. He is a very fit, buff male, darker complected male with long locks, has a very urban hip hop look to himself. But he's also a kid that has never experienced any type of encounter with police. He's also a kid that's never really experienced any encounter with suspension and school troubles and even just really troubles with his parents. He's been
Right.
a very good kid. But what
Right.
I have taught him is, son, we see that the world that we live in today, we don't think good first. We think bad first,
Right.
And so we have all these conceptions and stuff, and then we're guilty before we even know anything about. So the
Right.
main thing that I encourage is character. I don't care what you look like, son. You can look like whoever you want to look like. You make sure that you keep your character intact, because at the end of the day, I don't care who accuses you. You just make sure that you are not guilty.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, not to mention the fact that, like, let's say you do get pulled over by the police. Like, for at least I know for me, if I get pulled over, and I'm not a black man,
Mhm.
but there's still like a sense of like my nerves start going. I'm like, oh
Mhm.
boy,
I
like
get it.
what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm not necessarily scared to get shot or whatever.
Mhm.
It's just you did something wrong
Yep.
possibly,
Yep.
and now you're you don't know what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
It's a scary situation.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. That's a lot to
that
talk
that
about.
is a lot, and that's a
Mhm.
whole nother
It is.
topic
It
on its
is.
own.
Yeah. But
But I believe that you're raising your kids right to
and so I'm glad you say that, David, because at the end of the day, even with my experiences, and I also have a 24-year-old son, a son that'll be
okay.
25 in September.
Oh,
And again, neither of my sons have ever had any experience with being incarcerated. I don't know if my oldest son, has ever been. I'm sure he's been pulled over, but he's never been incarcerated. He's never been handcuffed or anything like that
right.
that I know of. I know if he been in jail. I don't know if old boy been handcuffed. I'm gonna have to ask. But it's liberating. It feels good to know that with all of the experiences that I've had
Mhm.
with the police department, with incarcerations, the condition of the world that we're living in, I just thank God that until this point, I don't know what the future holds, but I thank God to this point that my sons and all of my sons, because we have a beautiful blended family,
Okay.
all of my sons from the youngest to the oldest don't have a testimony of like I have, and I'm girls kind of tend to be the softer ones and the ones that experience less. I kind of have a
Right.
harder experience of stuff than my husband, and he's been in the army and everything. But you know what? It's like, hey, I'm glad I could use my testimony with my family to help encourage them and to mentor them
Yeah.
in the right direction, because
Yeah.
I share all of my war stories with them. I don't hold anything back. Maybe with my daughter, just because she's a little young right now, and some stuff I don't think her tender spirit is able to even take it
Right.
all in.
Right.
But with my older sons who are getting older, I share my experiences with them because I would rather they be scared straight through my
Right.
experiences
Yeah.
than scared straight through the system.
And it absolutely works because they can look at your life and be like, I don't want my
Yep.
life to be like that.
Mhm.
I want better, and that's what happened to me
Yeah.
with me growing up in foster care,
Yeah.
or in foster care, and then
Mhm.
like with my mom and the kind of like the relationship she was in and the
Yeah.
decisions she made. I didn't want to make those same mistakes that
Mhm.
she made, so I've made it a point to not make my life that, because I don't want my kids to have to grow up in foster care and kind of go through the same things I went through.
Yeah, I get it. And
Yeah.
I adore that about you.
Oh,
In
thanks.
fact, I was kind of bragging on you before I came to my husband. I'm like, man, David is like, it's admirable. I'm just going to say that. And so thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for using your adversities to be, because that's what it's about. We use our pain. There's purpose in our pain. The
Yep.
reason you have this Rising Above podcast is because you've had some experiences
Yep.
to say, you know what, hey, you can rise above it.
Right.
And I'm not the only one that has an interesting story, but I'm going to create this awesome platform to invite other people who have an
Right.
awesome testimony too. So thanks.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one thing I've realized by doing this podcast is my story is nothing compared to a lot of these people who've come on. I'm like, I seem normal compared to these people.
And we all have diverse stories,
Yeah.
because
And that's
like,
what's cool.
yeah, your
Yeah.
story is definitely helping a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of people reach out to me and thank me for doing it, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's never an easy thing to put your stuff out there. I mean, you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to
No,
talk about,
it's not.
but
It's not.
it's something that needs to be done so that it can help somebody who's possibly in the same situation or
Exactly.
have gone through the same things. So, at some point, you lost your child into foster care, right?
I
How-
did.
At what point was that? Was it after your incarcerations? Was it before?
So, David, interestingly enough, this is I've been interviewed a lot.
Have you?
I have.
For
I've been
what?
on a lot of podcasts.
Really?
I've had
Which podcasts? Local ones?
local ones. Yeah, I've had a lot of local podcast interviews.
Were you on America?
I have not, but I was recently on with Jerry
Okay.
Norris,
Yeah.
and I have had some newspaper interviews through New Citizens Press with Rena Risper. I've had some Lansing State Journal a few years ago,
Cool.
and I've even written a book about my life.
What's the book called?
My book is called A Wonderful Change.
And where can you find that?
And you can find that book on Amazon.com, or you can go to my website, which is love LuvCovers.org, and it's just kind of a hub to everything creative that I do.
So when you sell that book, you get the money for it?
I do. I get the
Okay.
money for it. It depends on what type of work that I'm in the vein of, because if I'm in the vein of something else that ties into some of the stories in my book that I'm sharing, I give a percentage to an organization
Oh,
that,
cool.
yeah. So like when I had my book release,
Yeah.
I talked, my book talks a lot about my experience with domestic abuse and how I was affected and how I was the aggressor, right? Well, affected as a whole.
Right.
And so, because part of my testimony was about staying at various domestic abuse shelters, I then sent 20% of all of my proceeds, directly to the actual shelter that I stayed at.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
so
That
again,
is
just
sweet.
oh my goodness. So just really being full circle about, my experiences, giving
Right.
back to the areas in which I experienced some hardship.
So you haven't actually made any money off of it.
So no, I have.
You have,
I'm
okay.
in my fourth print now. Well, I'm
Okay.
going towards my fourth print. I
Okay.
just literally sold my last book of my third print yesterday. And keep in mind, my first print was in 2009.
Okay.
So 2019. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
2019.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm on my fourth print now. So that means I'm going on 400 books sold, and that ain't a lot, but like two.
That's a lot.
Is it?
That's a lot.
Okay.
Think about, like, if 400 people listen to this podcast,
Yeah.
each one of them have heard your story.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
That's
that
a
is
lot of
true.
people. That's a lot of people.
That is true. Yeah. So I just do what I'm supposed to do when it comes to sharing my work. I don't think of my experiences, any work that I do as far as being tied into my experiences. I
Mhm.
try not to look at it as a monetary gain or a
Right.
success tool,
Right.
because I have a great entrepreneurial position.
Yeah.
God has put me in a great place of being able to have a position for myself
Right.
and positions for others. So when it comes to my music, when it comes to my book, when it comes to my, because I do spoken word poetry too, so I write poetry and
Do you
perform it.
where do you perform it?
So I am a little slow in the game, just a little bit because I have so much going on and I have to be careful to balance. But I was able to participate in the Juneteenth
Okay.
spoken word night that was hosted by Miles Johnson at the Urban Beat at
Okay.
Juneteenth. And so that was a wonderful night. Full band, shout out to the Corzo band. They were out there jamming that night. And so that was one of my first times to share some spoken word. I was able
Okay.
to take the stage at Juneteenth and share some spoken word poetry. And as I mentioned earlier in the interview, tomorrow I'll be at Bless Fest and I'll be
Yeah.
sharing song and spoken word there. But all of that is ministry. I don't believe in over promoting. I believe in doing things. You plant the seed, you allow other people to water it, and God gives the increase. I don't look at my work as a way to just get popular
Right.
or,
Yeah.
so I am proud of those 300 books sold,
You
going into
should be.
400 with that fourth print. It'll be more, this next print will be more of a deluxe edition because
Okay.
my life has grown 2 years since then. And so there are some untold stories that have happened. Even some of the stories that I told in my book, I just kind of looking back, they say hindsight is 2020.
Hmm.
And some stories I wish I could elaborate more on, or rather say I'm going to elaborate more
Okay.
on. One really being because I spent a lot of time, I think I just kind of rushed it. I'm just going to be honest. I rushed it. It was kind of a time sensitive situation as we moved on. And I think I just really missed a lot of intimate points that I could
Right.
have made because even though my childhood was full of hardship, full of inconsistency, full of instability, there were some precious times that I remember with my mother, that I
Mm.
wish I could have really just elaborated on. So this next time around, I do want to share about how my mom really did impact me in ways that I use to this day. I didn't think it mattered much then because all I saw was the hurt, the pain, and all of
Right.
that. But there are a lot of ways that I use about my parenting, in my parenting, even though my mom was struggling, that she used with me, that I carried on into my marriage and into my family, that works like never before. Some of the most important pieces of my family, which is prayer and
Mhm.
togetherness and being together and just sticking together, as much as you can control.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you released the book in 2019. What was that process like? As far as writing, did you work with a publishing company?
Mhm.
Was it local?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. So I did work with a local publishing company.
Okay.
Shout out to Gemstone's Publishing,
Okay.
Reverend Mary Harris, and she did help me a lot in that process. Again, I just was in a different space at that time, and
What were you trying to achieve by writing the book?
mhm.
What was your goals?
You asked the greatest questions, David. Yeah. So my goal in writing the story is sometimes when you've had really intense moments in life, sometimes you feel like you're alone. And in 2019, I had grown to be this polished person that people who did not know me outside of church or outside of the professional world thought that I was just some nice little old church lady that that went around delivering meals to people and working in the pantry and just this devoted wife and mom because me and my husband are really tight and I testify a lot about our closeness and how our family works and how it works and all that.
Mhm.
And I was just, I was almost irritated by how good people thought I was. And I'm like, you know what? I'm really not that good. So if you knew the hardships that I had to overcome to
Mhm.
get here,
Right.
hopefully it will help you glorify God and develop your own relationship and work towards those same victories. Not my same testimony, but the same victory. You can have victory too, because sometimes people lose hope by looking at people and thinking that they're so perfect. And they
Right.
say, oh, you don't know because I was in foster care, or I was locked up, or I lost my son, or I got stabbed, or I stabbed someone, or all this other long laundry list of
Right.
reasons to say, hey, you're not who I am. So don't tell me I can be like you because you don't have the story that I have.
Right.
But then
Yep.
that's where I come in and say, hey, bro,
You don't need
hey,
that story.
sis, yeah, in fact, I do have that story, and you still can come out on the other side if you, like you said, you realize you have a problem
Yeah.
and you go to the core of that problem and you start making changes towards the betterment, the outcome, the transformation of it all. When you make the decision, it doesn't matter what's in your background. You can absolutely change if you have a mind to.
Absolutely. You put
Mhm.
your mind to anything, you can accomplish
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um. So, at what point we kind of got way off track,
It's
but
okay.
at what point did you lose your kids? How many kids did you lose to foster care?
So at that time, so I was a teen parent. So,
Okay.
okay, that part was all skipped too. That was another contributing factor to just how hard it was. I got pregnant when I was 16. I had them when I was 17. By 19, I was chasing after love, which I
Mhm.
thought was love, and it wasn't love. And in the it all kind of ties together because the incarcerations and all that was kind of in the same vein of things. Um, but I did. I I was already kind of just on the verge, or just in the process of just being a neglectful parent. You call a spade a spade. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say, oh, well, the system came to my door for no reason.
Right.
They had a reason to come. I gave them a reason to come, and I confirmed it when they came. However, the unfairness that came about in the whole process was, okay, I know I have a problem. I made some mistakes. Now my son has been removed from me at this point, just in foster care. In that same vein of things, and I can't remember, David. It might take me too long to. I will almost have to like sit and really think in my head if I was incarcerated before that happened or if I wasn't. I want to say that I wasn't.
Okay.
I was not incarcerated when all of that happened.
Okay.
But I became incarcerated shortly after it happened. I mean, like literally shortly, within weeks or a month.
Do you think that incident sent you spiraling, kind of out of control?
Oh, David, we gonna get to that point,
Okay.
sir. Yep.
Sorry, I don't mean to rush it.
No, you're fine. You're so fine. And so I was already in a position where my son had just recently been introduced to the foster care system. And then I had made a decision to respond very violently to being assaulted, because I was assaulted first, and I responded by stabbing the girls that assaulted me. And so I went to jail. Well, by the time I went to jail, I had already been to court a little bit in the process of my son.
Mhm.
And they had only given me, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, David. No, 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 no. It's backwards. The foster care system had only given me a year to fight for my son to get him back. Well,
Okay.
I was already incarcerated. So I was already incarcerated, and they gave me a year to get him back. Well, that was almost like double jeopardy, because remind you, I had already said I was incarcerated. I was sentenced to a year.
Right.
I was sentenced to a year in the county, and then you go to family court to fight for your life of having your son, and they give me the same amount of time to get my son back that I was incarcerated.
Right.
So, like, what the heck? Just tell me you're not going to give me a chance, because how do you give me a year
When you're in
to
jail.
get my son back, but I have 10 months? Well, at that point, it was a year because the good time hadn't even kicked in.
Okay.
And so you give me a year to get him back, but I'm also sentenced to a year. Like, what the heck? Okay, so that zapped all of the
Uh,
enthusiasm out of me to
So
try.
this is what I'm curious because you're the first person I've had on the podcast since I started the podcast that has lost a kid to foster care, and
Mhm.
I've been wanting to ask this question for a
Yeah.
long time.
Mhm.
What is that like as a mom to lose your kid and not knowing what is to come as far as will you ever see him again? Um, what is that like? What is what was that moment like for you when you realized that you weren't gonna see your kid again? And I'm sorry if this is a difficult question.
It's okay, David. It's difficult, but it's necessary. So when he was taken away from me, I didn't necessarily think that I would never see him again, because I really didn't think that I was that bad of a parent that my son would be taken away from me for so long that he'd be a young adult before I see him again. But when my son got taken away from me, it opened up um, feelings of suicide. I wanted to die. I just wanted to die. I knew I already felt rejection just being in foster care myself, but I had grew out of that because I felt healed just by, like, wow, I'm a parent now. I have my own kid. I can try the best that I can for my child. But when he was taken away, that was all I had. He was my whole family. And I just wanted to die. I hated people, which is probably why I responded um in the way that I did to a lot of stuff that happened to me. David, I did try to kill myself. I didn't just feel suicidal. The same type of gun that I had at school when I was 13 years old or so was the same type of gun that I put to my head in a local hotel. And I still had a lot of resentment towards my mother. And I talk about all this in my book. And I wanted her to witness me killing myself because I felt like she was the reason for my son being taken away from me. And that's a whole different story, and you had to buy my book to
I'm going to buy
understand.
the.
And at that point, I got on my knees and I took that gun, loaded Glock 9, safety off, no scientific reason why that gun didn't go off. And I tried to shoot myself. And the gun wouldn't go off. I was taking the gun and I was banging it on the table. And I'm yelling at my mother, and she's freaking out, and she's praying, and she's asking God to help. And she just hung up on me and she called the police. And they came to that hotel. They evacuated the hotel. It was on the news that night. It was like Men in Black. They they opened the door. They said, "Come out with your hands up. If you come out with the gun in your hand, we will shoot you." And I said, "Okay." I knew I didn't want to die because I would have did something stupid
Mm-hmm.
for them to kill me. And
Right.
I knew I didn't want to die. But I just felt so much pain, like, oh my gosh, you're such a reject. Nobody wants you, then you lose your kid, and then now you're in this position. So I was at the lowest that I could possibly be.
Right.
And in that moment, you talk about grace, you talk about mercy. I've had so much grace and mercy in my life that it has shown me to be merciful to others, because a person at that point that had the violent background that I had, a person that already had a background of having that same type of gun in their possession, the police who I thought hated me, the police that I thought felt nothing about me, was the same actual police that in that, I'll never forget, the police officer was taking me downstairs and he looked at me and he saw how broken I was and I was weeping and I was so heavy. And he said, "What's wrong? Something's wrong." He knew that I wasn't some crazed maniac that just wanted to take a gun and blow my brains out. He knew that there was some psychology behind all of that anxiety. And he took the time to actually ask me, "What is wrong with you?" And that was the first time that I felt like somebody cared in that vein of feeling like nothing. And I said, "Sir, they just took my son from me. I'm a hot girl. I'm on the run from people who literally looking for me in the streets for some of the stuff that I've done. They took my son from me. I got warrants. I'm just going to end up being locked up anyway, but I'm hurting." And he looked I'll never forget, David. I talk about it in my book. The man looked at me and he said, I wish I knew his name. He said, "You know what? You're not a criminal. You're not a bad person. You're just hurting and you need help." And at that point, they sent me to community mental health. And that's where they set me up to get help, but it wasn't really the help I needed because they wanted to make me crazy.
Right.
They wanted to make it seem like I had all these issues that was so heavy that only medicine could fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody, but because I had a relationship with God, even in that worst of moments, I knew that the medication wasn't what was going to fix it. And so every day that I had to go out there with people rocking back and forth, people running through the hall naked, screaming obscenities, cursing me out for no reason. They wasn't in their right mind, and God bless them, but I wasn't one of them. I had a bunch of baggage that I needed somebody to help me therapeutically unpack. And so every day I would go out there and I would put that pill under my tongue. And I remember in jail, they'll make you stick your tongue up and do all that and all that. They didn't make me do that in CMH. And I'll go back to my room and I would spit it out every time because I said, "Is this what's making these people like they are?" I said, "I don't want to be one of them. God, if you could fix me, fix me." And so, by the grace of God, I can't even tell you anything that I did by the books or by strategy or whatever. There was no strategy to it other than trusting God. And I knew I didn't want to be like that. And so it wasn't that instance that I ultimately changed and that the transformation came, but that was one part of it. It was a very integral part of me realizing that I wasn't crazy and that I just needed a different type of help.
Right. So did you seek out any other help after that?
Mm-mm.
No.
In fact, it didn't get better. I was like 20 years old when that happened.
Oh man.
So like life, the stab incident hadn't happened at that point.
Okay.
I hadn't even gotten to some of the other things that I had experienced in my life, but no, I was on a downward spiral. Even from that point, it was probably when I became pregnant with my second son, who is 19, that I realized that even after having my oldest son removed from me and actually being adopted and not having my rights terminated to him, I had so many naysayers saying, "You know what? You won't ever, if you have any other children, you won't, the system, the way that the system is set up, you won't get your children back.
Yeah.
You won't," and the system was set up like that. The Connie Bensfield legislation says that after you've had a child removed and they were adopted, that the Binsfield legislation comes in to investigate and or remove every child thereafter.
Mhm.
And so,
Regardless of your status, and
regardless of your status, they come and investigate every time, and that happened.
you can't have your kids at that point.
Oh well, absolutely, because my other children that I had were never removed from me.
Okay. Okay.
But they did come investigate.
Every
I
single
don't care,
time.
every single time. I don't care if I was married, if I was. And so that made me look into how broken the Michigan foster care system is, how broken it is that they're removing children and sending them into adoption and not really giving the resources to the parents to really rehabilitate themselves to get the children
Right.
back, right? Because
Right.
that's kind of what happened to me. Ain't no kind of to it. That's what happened to me. You sentenced me to the same time that I'm incarcerated. So you're not even really giving me
Right.
room for improvement.
Yeah.
And so my mind was blown during the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit. Everybody was at home. We had a lot of time, and for some reason I was really inclined to know where the child welfare system was at. And it broke my heart to see how, David, it's crazy. Children are not being reunited in the time that Michigan mandates that they shoot for, that 1 year that children are reunited. They
Mhm.
were showing a shortage of people that weren't even available. Drivers, for instance, drivers to take foster kids to meeting points, even with their parents. So
Mhm.
parents were meeting reunification times with their children because the state didn't have enough drivers or they weren't equipped or whatever. And it was just so much brokenness that I said, my Lord, I have to share my story, because if people keep thinking that I'm so good, you won't know what areas that I have experienced that are still a thing today that still need attention and help.
Right.
So yeah, it's my story gets really deep, David, and I don't think I've ever been as emotional as I just got today, but it felt good to get it out because it is a very very sensitive subject to talk about. But I am glad to say that my hope never fizzled out, even after my son was adopted. Um, for years, I would fight to try to see if we could even just see each other. I would look for him at stores and stuff and
Mm.
think I would see him, and oh, that kid looks like him. One time, David, I did see him in the newspaper.
Oh,
He
wow.
was in the newspaper with his first grade class, and it was such a joy to me because I hadn't seen him and I knew it was my baby, even though I hadn't seen him since he was 2 or 3 years old. He was 6 or 7 at that time, and I
Wow.
saw him, and they changed
Wow.
his name and everything, and I knew it was my baby, and I held on to that name until he was old enough for me to look him up. And I didn't even, this is how good God works, because I kept saying, I said, when my son turns 18, I'm going to be able to look him up, and God is going to put him back in my life. I didn't even have to work that hard. When my son, 4 months before he turned 18, I was sitting in my office doing work per usual, and I get a call from a girl that hadn't seen my son since he was about 6 months old.
Wow.
And at 18 years old, she took one look at him. She said, Dara, I know it's him. She said, if you're okay with it, is it okay if I probe more information to put the two of you in contact with each other? And so I was a little doubtful at first. And I said, no, I've heard that before. I got all excited. It wasn't him. And she said, Dara, I really have a feeling in my heart. I know it's him. And make a long story short, that was 6 years ago, and me and my son are reunited.
What was that like? What was that moment like? Did he call you? Did you meet him in person? What was
So,
the first time you talked to him?
yep.
What was that like?
so, so I talked to him on the phone, and it was nervous. It was a very nerve wracking, but it was nerve wracking with excitement. Because that phone call was following. So I'm sorry. The first communication was a letter,
Mm.
because there's still a process, because even though I felt entitled to reuniting with him, I knew there was still a process of respect, and
Right.
I didn't want to impose any disrespect on anybody.
Mhm.
So I said, well, let me find a way to reach out to his parents, because they're his parents.
Right.
And I reached out to them, And it was all orchestrated by God. They worked hand in hand with me. They did everything that they could to assist me. The mom even told me that she had always told him that he was adopted and that she would reunite him with his family when the time
Wow.
came. Yup. And it didn't even have to get to that because someone was already lined up to put together the pieces. And I
Right.
am still very grateful for everyone that had a role in our reunification because it was truly a 15-year prayer answered. For 15 years, I woke up every day wondering. I didn't let it drive me crazy. For about 10 years, I did let it drive me crazy.
Mhm.
But when God was showing me that He did entrust me with His, when He gave me another child, and He showed me that I was entrusted to be a good steward over this perfect life that He blessed me with, I had to change my focus because if I was so focused on the pain that I experienced from losing him and the excitement of reuniting with him, I would have been off balance for raising the child that I had. And then after that, I had gotten married and had another child. So I had to stay focused on what was before me so I could
Right.
be prepared for what was to come.
Yeah, you can't hold on to that. You have to, in a sense, move on.
Yeah.
Don't forget, but move on so
Yeah.
you can grow.
Yep.
I kind of have the same situation right now
Yeah.
because I have a kid, a son, that I'm not allowed to have anything to do with.
Mhm.
And so, I think about him every single day.
Yeah.
I don't know him. I've never met him. But I've tried to, get some sort of establish some sort of guardianship or whatever, and the
Mhm.
court didn't work in my favor. But because of that, I can't hold on to that. I have to
Mhm.
continue to move on, and
That's
one
right.
day, hopefully, we'll reunite.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. That's the attitude.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, I kind of want to move your story along because
Yep.
I think we're an hour and 15 minutes in. Yeah,
Wow.
this
It
is
doesn't
insane.
seem like it.
This is insane.
We might
It,
have to do part two
we're
another
gonna have to
time.
do a part two.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I would love to have you back
Yeah.
on. So at what point did you decide, or did your life start to change into where you kind of ended up where you are now?
Yeah. All right. That's a good way to close stuff out. So, in 2010, I found myself walking down the aisle, dun 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 dun, hey, and that was a miracle in itself because I was at a point for so long of thinking I'd never be married. I was too messed up. Who would want me? You can't even take care of your kid. Like, who really wants to make you their wife? And when God restored my confidence, He brought someone in my life that, even though it was a quirky process of how He was brought into my life, God allowed it. And I said, Lord, since you allowed this, I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to glorify your name in this process of transformation because even marrying my husband was in the process of transformation. And my husband is my greatest supporter, my number one cheerleader. He is, certainly through the grace of God, he is the reason I'm an entrepreneur right now. Because when we married, I was a person that just really had a good heart and wanted to be a mom and a wife and, help him as much as I could.
Hmm.
And even though I didn't have a business background, I really didn't have a background of, anything conducive to help him move forward with his business. However, he believed in me. And just that very act of kindness and him showing me that he believed in me, every day I woke up and I said, how am I going to show him that his believing in me isn't in vain? And so I would find myself trying to do any little thing that I could for his business because he's the brainchild behind Wise Man Tree Experts.
Mm.
And so I worked as much as I could to show him that, you know what, if you give me a chance, it'll be a chance that you will never regret. And so I started out by answering the phone and just, I mean, little stuff. which has snowballed into us literally being business partners where we're actually share in the business, that we work together. We started out, when I came on the scene, we had about 700 customers, which I think was pretty impressive at that
That's
time.
really impressive.
He had been in business for about 7 years. And so 7 or 8 years. And today we have served over 3,000 customers
Wow.
after 20 years of business. And
Wow.
just by having someone believe in me and say, you know what, you're not your past. I can help you. I believe in you. And so when he gave me that room for growth, that just catapulted things. We became partners in ministry where we help a lot at our church, in our community, in our business, in our family, and that has resulted in me starting my own grassroots projects by way of my book and my spoken word poetry and my music, and now Love Covers, which is the hub and home of everything, everything creative that I do. Yep. So,
Let's talk about that for a minute.
uh huh.
When did that come about?
Love Covers.
Yes.
Yeah. So Love Covers came about, and it kind of was a thing before it was a thing because we would always just do these ministry projects where we would help the community do stuff where you wouldn't really find much donations for, like, you can go and get a can of soup before you can get socks, underwear, and t-shirts. So
Right.
we would do stuff like that for the community and school age kids and stuff. And then got into my book and all that. And then so in 2019 I was consulting with one of my good friends who was actually a new friend. Now, this was more in 2020, but a friend that said, Dara, you have a lot going on. It's a lot about you that you kind of need to just make Love Covers the nucleus of everything creative that you're doing. Make it the home of what you're doing. So, shout out to Miles Johnson because he did give me that idea to, make everything under the umbrella of Love Covers. But yeah, Love Covers became a thing in late 2019. And then 4 months after that, the pandemic hit. And I mean, everything works for a reason. Through the pandemic, I have just been building my brand and really trying to brainstorm really what is Love Covers all about. And we've done a lot of strategic planning. And from that, we have birthed, I have a health and fitness group on Facebook where I lost 40 pounds. So I use everything,
Awesome.
yeah, everything that I did that was conducive to me having that progress and success with there, helping people live healthier lives. Through my book, I share my testimony about how you can come from the other side of hardness into great achievement through God. So it all kind of started for me and my own organic grassroots projects really more so in 2019 is when things started to pop off. And I'm just glad that I have trustworthy people and good people that I can
Hmm.
work with, like you, to partner with and be able to
Yeah.
share my story and let people know who I am and what I'm doing and how we can work together.
Absolutely. That is awesome. So, where do you see Love Covers going in the near future?
Yep, I see Love Covers going far
Because
in.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
it's a business, right?
It is a
So, how
business.
does it operate as a like from a business perspective?
Yep. So, although a lot of our initiatives tend to lean more towards nonprofit,
Okay.
like with Working Undercover is what the Undergarments initiative is
Okay.
called, but there are some for profit, like the book and the
Right.
CD, and I also offer
I see. I see.
fashion consulting.
Okay.
So it is a business. I do a lot of public speaking. When I won't say a lot, but when I'm called, I'll do some public speaking and share my testimony. So there is on my website a tab where you can fill out the form and request me to come speak at your event. You can click the tab for shopping where you can see all of our featured fashions.
Wow.
And then I also have a tab called God's Power, which highlights not just my testimony, but testimonies of other people like you
Okay.
and me who have dynamic testimonies that other people absolutely have to hear to
Right.
help them in their belief and healing process.
That's cool. That is
Yeah.
really cool. So, where do you see this going in the near future?
Yeah. I
Or
see
what
it.
is your hopes, I
Yep.
should say?
Okay. So my hope is that it just grows just as it has been growing. Now, I don't really have when I think I don't really tie success with LuvCovers because for some reason when I think success, I think me. You know, and so if there is a lot of success tied to LuvCovers, I really hope and pray it's the success and transformation from other people because I truly believe that success is not success if you're not helping someone else grow. I'm not successful if I haven't helped someone else grow.
Hmm.
So I'm just praying that LuvCovers continues to be a network, really a hub of a networking platform to be able to link with other business owners. My Facebook page I use to highlight other business owners. I've shared a lot of your podcasts on
Really?
there. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
Ooh,
I've
that's awesome.
shared. Yeah, because I want to be love covers. Love covers what? Love covers everything. Love covers a multitude of sins. You know, so I want love to cover everything that I do. It's not about my success. It's
Hmm.
about looking out for other people. So if I see a story out there that's like, wow, if it affected me like that, let me put it on Love Covers so people
Right.
that are following me can find out who you or they are and they can click like and follow and be tied in too. So
Right.
I just really Love Covers is successful when it makes an impact to people that follow us. That's the only success that I'm looking for. So I'm just praying that not necessarily for growth, but really for endurance, that we are here and that we're here to stay and that we continue to make an impact to all those who check in with us.
I think that's extremely important. Because that's one thing a lot of people people get like a competition aspect to things like, oh well, there's another podcast out there,
Yeah.
now they're gonna take my listeners or
Mhm.
whatever. But the thing is like with like doing podcasts or like you sharing my stuff or me sharing your stuff,
Yep.
it's bringing everybody around you up, and it's
Yeah.
not taken from anybody.
Absolutely.
You know, you're still there, your content's still there,
Yep.
people still listen.
Mhm.
You know, it's not you're not fighting for this ground, you know.
Exactly,
So
exactly. In fact, tomorrow at Bless Fest, I have a short segment for a fashion show. And although I have some pretty dope fashions to show for fall, I did incorporate fashions from two other businesses to show in that lineup because again my I don't have to bully my way to
right,
success. You know, it's there, I just have to align with it,
right,
and I think aligning with it is through working with other people.
right, absolutely. I had Erin Meadows on the podcast. I don't know if
Okay.
you know who she is. She's a local business owner of Abundance Cafe, and
Sounds good to me.
her food looks really good. I need to
Wow.
order some, but she was saying how she when she sells her food, she'll also sell like sauces and stuff from other companies, like local businesses.
I
And
love it.
she said when she starts a storefront, she's going to sell other businesses
I
like
love it.
merchandise as well.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's so awesome
Yep.
because a lot of times you see these businesses, they're competing with these other businesses, and they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with them.
Yep.
But if you're bringing everybody up around you,
Yep.
then you can only rise from
That's
there.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's the way to think.
Is there anything or anything else you want to talk about? Anything you want to mention? Is there any messages of positivity you want to put out there?
Well, if there's any message of positivity, well, first I'll say, whatever else I got going on, I'm gonna save it for part two.
Awesome.
But if there's any message of positivity or hope that I would want to leave for someone else, is to run your race. Run your race without looking in the stands. Don't listen for a cheer. Don't listen for a boo. You just run your race to the finish line and then you can turn around and rejoice, but just run without distraction.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I think we should end it
Yeah.
there.
Cool with me.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having
This
me.
was a great conversation.
Yeah.
You made me emotional when you were crying, because I can understand the exact feelings you were having, but from the opposite perspective because
Mhm.
I was the child in that position,
Mhm.
and much like that situation, I ended up finding my mom too, and I remember having to call her, and that it was just like a surreal moment. So like you expressing your emotions,
Yep.
kind of like kind of brought these feelings up that I had,
Yeah.
and then my eyes were getting all teary-eyed and
Yep.
whatnot. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.